So now we've dealt with the domain entity layer, we're going to move up to the next layer, which of course is our application layer. And what we'll do inside here is we'll go to our application project and we'll create a new folder for a new feature and we'll call it followers. And inside here we're going to create a new C# class and we're going to call this one follow toggle. We're going to use the same class or the same handler for whether we're following or unfollowing a user. So what we'll do is we'll create a new class. So we'll say public class, and this is going to be a command. We don't need to return any data from this. We're merely updating our database, and we'll use the iRequest and bring in mediator. And then of course we're going to return a result of type unit. And we'll also need to bring in the application core here as well. And inside this class we need one property. We need to know the target user that this user is attempting to follow. So what we'll do is we'll add a string and we'll call this target username. Of course we can get the observer username from the token that they'll be using to authenticate the request. And then we'll create a handler. So we'll say public class handler of type iRequestHandler, and we'll pass in the command and the result of type unit. And then we can go ahead and implement the interface. And we'll make this an async task. And what we'll also do is add what we need for this particular handler. So we're updating the database, so it goes without saying we need to add our data context. We also need to get access to the user, the currently logged in user that's attempting to follow the other user. So we're going to need access to our user accessor as well. And let's just go ahead and bring in what we need. So we need persistence and we need application interfaces, and we can just go ahead and initialize the fields from parameter. And then we can deal with the logic that we need inside the handle method. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get our two users involved in this particular request. So we need our observer. This is the user we're going to use to follow the other user. And we'll say await, and we'll say context.users, and we'll say first or default async, and we'll say x goes to x.username, but let's just bring in Entity Framework Core first so that we get IntelliSense help. And then we could say x goes to x.username, that's equal to the user accessor, and we'll use the getUsername method from inside there. And we'll assume that because they're authenticated by the time they get to this stage, that we do have a user object inside the observer. Then we'll save our target equals await and context.users dot first or default async, and we'll say x goes to x.username, that's equal to the request.target username. And with this now, what we can do, actually we should first of all check to make sure we have a target, because this is a parameter that we're receiving from the client. So we'll check this for null, and we'll say if the target is null, then return null. And we can be confident now that we have both user objects. So what we can do is we can check, or we can attempt to get a following from our database. So what we'll do, we'll save our following equals await and then context, and we can say user followings, and then we can use the find async method, and we just need to pass in the primary key for this particular entity. And we can get that of course from the observer ID and the target ID. So we'll pass in the observer.id and the target.id as the parameters here. So then what we can do is check to see if the following is null. If it's null, we're going to create a new following. If it's not null, we're going to simply remove the following. So we'll say if the following is equal to null, then we're going to say following equals new user following, and we'll need to bring in domain to make use of this. And we can just pass in the properties we need to create a new following. In this case, we just need to pass in the observer and the target. So we'll say target equals target. And then what we can use is context.userFollowings.add and we'll pass in the new following. And we'll add an else statement, as if we do have a following, then we know that we want to remove this particular following. So what we'll do is we'll say context user followings.remove, and then we'll pass in the following. As easy as that. And then we can save our changes to the database. So we'll say var success equals await and context and save changes async, that's greater than 0. And we'll say if success, then we're going to return the results of type unit.success, and we'll just pass back unit.value. And if it fails, then we're just going to return the results of type unit.failure, and we'll just say failed to update following. So nice and easy so far, all pretty straightforward. It does get a little bit trickier very soon, but for now, what we're doing here is pretty straightforward. What we'll take a look at next is adding a controller so that we can add an endpoint to execute this particular handler.